And we've got that and much more lined up for you in this particular program. So starting getting us on socials at EBN TV Kenya, that is on Facebook, at EBN TV, that is on YouTube, and you can also send us your feedback through our SMS line, that is 23059. Now Morning Live starts now. And after 48 days actually of industrial action, the university lecturers strike has officially been called off. The university's academic staff union, that is WASU, has reached a return to work agreement with the government, paving the way for the resumption of learning in public universities across the country. The deal was reached after a 4-hour meeting between the union officials and the Ministry of Education, where it was agreed that lecturers will be paid 7.9 billion Kenya shillings in 2 installments, with the first phase amounting to 3.5 billion Kenya shillings. WASU is now calling on its members to return to class immediately, even as the agreement stipulates that negotiations for the 2025 to 2029 collective bargain agreement, that is the CBA, will be concluded within 30 days.
The strike is over. Today, the University Academic Staff Union has received a commitment by the Ministry of Education, the National Treasury, and the councils of universities, undertaking that 7.9 billion shall be released to staff in public universities in 2 tranches as follows. Kenya shillings 3.8 billion in November, but not later than 31st December 2025. Kenya shillings 3.8 billion in July 2026. Universities that did not utilize the allocation of Kenya shillings 2.2 billion to pay arrears amounting to 182 million for 2017-2021 CBA, but instead utilized it for sustaining the CBA, salaries shall immediately top up when the government releases the funds. We are not leaving this industrial action with all what we wanted, which was immediate full implementation of 7.9 billion, but we have secured the 7.9 billion. I want to thank all the organs of the union, particularly National Executive Council and the National Delegate Council yesterday, that gave me power to call off this strike. We consider the firm commitment by the National Treasury and Parliament and balance against the interest of more than 600,000 students
been met fully. So we came back here into this hall yesterday and we continued negotiating, and eventually the unions accepted the 2 phased payment, first payment of 3.85 billion and first payment of 3.85 billion towards the end of this year and after the first supplementary, and the second payment will be in the financial year of 2026-2027.
All right, still on matters Education Cabinet Secretary Julius Ogamba has issued a stern warning to teachers and examination center managers, questioning that anyone found engaging in exam malpractice will face registration and prosecution. This comes as 5 individuals were arrested in Nairobi County for impersonating candidates, speaking integrity while supervising the ongoing KCSE examinations. Now, in its 3rd day yesterday, Ogamba expressed concerns over the rising cases of exam malpractice, urging all education stakeholders to uphold integrity throughout the exam period.
Assessments. The KJSE being the first transition assessment to senior school under the competency-based education was concluded on Monday this week. We applaud the candidates, teachers, and officials who worked tirelessly to ensure a seamless process. The ministry is now focused on the secure transfer and timely processing of the assessment materials in readiness for release and placement decisions. As part of the transition into senior school in 2026, we have today released the guidelines for the implementation of senior school education. These guidelines will strengthen institutional readiness, assist teachers, parents, and learners, and other stakeholders in education to adjust to the new curricular requirements. This will also ensure that schools are well prepared to receive the first CBE cohort progressing into grade 10 next year. We remain committed to a placement process that honors merit, learner preference, and available school capacity. The Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education examinations are ongoing nationwide. Today, candidates are sitting the chemistry paper in the morning session and the English paper in the afternoon session. These examinations mark an important step in their lives as they prepare for university education, vocational training, entrepreneurship, and future careers. While the vast majority of Kenyans have shown exemplary cooperation, it is regrettable that a few individuals have attempted to engage in examination malpractice despite repeated warnings. The government has already taken firm action against those involved, and these measures should serve as a strong deterrent to anyone contemplating to undertake similar misconduct. We will not allow any attempt to sabotage the future of our children or the global reputation.
All right, now moving on, President William Ruto has called on Kenyans living abroad to rally behind his vision of transforming Kenya into a developed nation. Speaking in Doha, Qatar, during a meeting with Kenyans residing there, the head of state lauded the diaspora community for their remarkable contribution of over $5 billion last year. He further urged them to channel their skills, experience, and resources towards building the nation, promising to review remittance charges downward, a move aimed at encouraging more investment back home.
We are working as a government to see how we can reduce the cost of you sending money back home, remittance. We know that it costs anywhere between 5 to 10% of the money you send. And if you look at the amount of money that comes to Kenya, it's about $5 billion. If you do 5% of $5 billion, it's colossal. It's huge money. It can make a big difference.
We are proud of the Kenyans who are working outside. We are really proud of them. As a country, you may not know, but I can tell you, you are making a tremendous contribution to the stability of our economy, and we want to continue thanking you for doing that.
All right, now the head of state in that particular tour in Doha, Qatar, actually said, that Kenya, we are facing power cuts, between what he termed as they want to have a load shedding, they will be having power cuts from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. To what he termed as to share the limited electricity fairly across the region. I don't know what's your take on that, to having the power cut between 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. That's the head of state. I was actually saying that in Doha, Qatar, to facilitate the energy that we have in the country. All right, do tell us your thoughts about that. Moving on, the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers KUPPET is now threatening to camp at Teachers Service Commission offices across the country, demanding the employment of over 20,000 teachers currently serving on contract. Led by Mombasa Branch Secretary Lynette Kamadi, the union has accused the TSC of dragging its feet in announcing the vacancies despite funds for recruitment already being allocated by the government. The teachers say the shortage of both primary and secondary school teachers has left those in service overstretched, handling huge student populations, even as the government maintains it is working to address the crisis.
The mission is very simple.
It was set aside 5.4 billion. We went to State House, the president confirmed and told us that they will be confirmed. If this process is not advertised as early as now, it means we have a risk of these teachers going through internship another year. So we are here to demand from Teacher Service Commission that we want to see that advert with immediate effect.
Power. Whatever you want to do, not even telling us what that new document is about the SHA, shifting us without us participating and giving our own views. Listen to the government of Kenya. We are not going to relent. This war you are starting, we have full armor of fighting it.
Please, honor that and do the necessary. Employ those teachers, confirm those teachers. There are only 20,000 teachers, and if possible, add more teachers so that the junior schools, and that is the child of Kenyan citizen, can be turned off by the government, because at the end of the day, we are paying the taxes.
Up to today, we have junior school teachers of this country, citizens of this country, patriots, who are teaching 40 lessons in a week, Monday to Friday. We shall not allow teachers to die of workload and stress related at the places of our work.
All right, DCP party leader Rigathi Gachagua has called on young people to take charge of Kenya's future by actively engaging in leadership and decision-making. Speaking during the DCP Youth League Forum at the party's headquarters, Gachagua said the 2027 elections present a historic opportunity for the youth to help reshape the nation's destiny, urging them to step forward and vie for elective positions. He described the youth as Kenya's most vital stakeholders, both the present and the future, and challenged them to use their numbers and energy to influence change. Gachagua also responded to President William Ruto's recent remarks that he no longer has a strong political rival, saying the next election will not be a contest against any individual, but between the president and the people of Kenya.
The mission is very simple. It's to help you, the young people, get rid of Kasongo and take your rightful place in the governance of this country. Hata nikimaliza hiyo niende wa Monyoro nikapumzike, I'll be quite happy. Kasongo waende, vijana wachukue nafasi. And let me confirm, for the avoidance of doubt, we shall have one single presidential candidate. Nimeona Kasongo amesponsor ma headline kwa ile magazeti yake jana. Rigiji asimami, ati sijui atawachia wengine ati apewe share ya serikali. Nani nakwambia? Rigiji is a front runner in this race, my friend. Rigiji, what I need to do is to persuade my colleagues that I have the numbers, I have the mobilization capacity, I can marshal enough resources, I have enough inspiration, I have enough messaging capacity to defeat William Ruto. I'll persuade my colleagues to make me the flag bearer. In case I don't persuade them, and they persuade me that another Kenyan can do it, I'll sacrifice. I will. But hiyo gazeti muliona, hiyo ni gazeti ya Kasongo. And it is run by the National Intelligence Service. I would like Kenyans to ignore that nonsense that was there yesterday. Sisi hatujaketi kukubaliana ni nani. Na hatukai haraka. Tutakaa baada ya Christmas 2026. For the time being, our single presidential candidate for now is Ruto must go. And our plan for now is one term.
All right, moving on, Public Service Cabinet Secretary Geoffrey Ruku has taken issue with remarks made by DCP party leader Rigathi Gachagua, accusing him of making divisive statements against Mount Kenya leaders. Speaking during an education sensitization meeting in Mbeere North, Embu County, Ruku dismissed Gachagua's claims that leaders from the region lack integrity, saying such utterances only serve to divide communities. He maintained that the Mount Kenya leaders continue to serve the nation diligently under the respected leadership of Deputy President Professor Kithure Kindiki. Meanwhile, residents in the area pledged their support for Leonard Wamuthende's parliamentary bid in Mbeere North.
Hapa ni mlima. Wewe Rigathi Gachagua unasema ati unataka mawakili wakuwe mbungeni, unataka professional wakuwe mbungeni. Nataka nikuelezee tukiwa hapa mlima hapa Mbeere North. Sisi tumesoma sawasawa, tumekuwa katika shule miaka mingi jameni, sio kama wewe na sio kama wewe na wale ambao mnaambatana na wao, akina Koimbori, akina Mejandong, akina yule mwingine wa hapa anaitwa Mbanzu pale Nairobi, watu ambao hawana makaratasi, hawajaenda shule yoyote. Kazi yake ni kuimba nyimbo za matusi. Kazi yake ni kuimba nyimbo ambazo zinaonyesha watoto wetu tabia ambaye we cannot call it a role model. Tabia ambayo haiwezi kuwa role model. Hiyo ndio wewe Rigathi Gachagua na viongozi wale wengine mumetafuta. Lakini watu wa Mbeere North wamesema kwa kauli moja, tarehe 27 mwezi huu wataamuka mapema so that you can be taught a lesson. Ya kwamba sisi tunajua ile ambayo tunataka. Ya kwamba sisi tunajua ile ambayo tunataka kama watu ya Mbeere North, kama watu ya mlima. Na tunataka maendeleo, hatutaki maneno tupu, hatutaki matusi yale ambao wewe na watu yako mko na.
Right, moving on, the Independent Electoral Monitoring Commission, that is the IEBC, has warned politicians against making inflammatory remarks about election rigging ahead of the 2027 polls. Speaking in Mombasa during a youth sensitization forum organized by Amnesty International, IEBC chairperson Erastus Edakon said such claims are meant to undermine public confidence in the electoral process. Edakon further assured Kenyans that the commission is fully prepared to conduct a free, fair and transparent election, urging young people to come out in large numbers and register as voters to exercise their democratic right.
To rig any election in this country. The systems are there, the checks and balances are there, the accountability points are there, we have observers, we have our technological system for voter identification, and of course the result transmission system, which is very robust.
The only way your voice can be heard is through the ballot, not fighting. You can't go to the street and achieve what you want to achieve. You need to go to the ballot and make sure that you achieve your objective. By doing so, you'll actually get good leaders.
This is an opportunity that you have. The youth of Kenya, if you want to make a difference, if you want to have an impact, a lasting impact in society, your voter's card is the silver bullet.
Right now, President William Ruto has announced a major crackdown on rogue employment agencies accused of exploiting Kenyans seeking jobs abroad. Speaking yesterday, President William Ruto revealed that about 600 recruitment firms with questionable records have been deregistered as part of the government's new strategy to sanitize the labor export sector. Now, the head of state further noted that the registration process for employment agencies has been overhauled to ensure only credible and transparent organizations are allowed to operate.
We had many very bad people operating as recruitment agencies. And we had very crooked, very unprofessional people. So we have had to change the registration process for recruitment agencies. And we have had to disappoint many people because recruitment agencies that had a track record of doing the wrong thing, we've had to deregister almost 600 recruitment agencies. We have had to deregister them because they were doing the wrong thing. They were picking money from people. They were sending people with, tourist visa. Many of the complaints that we got were because of the recruitment agencies doing the wrong things. We've since created a multi-agency team that now looks at the whole exercise of Kenyans being recruited outside Kenya in a holistic manner. We have gone through the motions to make sure that all the job opportunities from every part of the world are posted on a government website where everybody can see. So that if it is not in the government website, then you know that job is actually fake.
Now, Agriculture Cabinet Secretary, that is Mutahi Kagwe, has now wants those selling fake seeds to farmers to face treason charges, saying the crime threatens Kenya's food security. Speaking in Nyeri during the launch of Modern Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service facilities, Kagwe urged Parliament to enact laws prescribing severe penalties, equating the offense to treason. The Agriculture CS also called on security agencies to intensify crackdowns on individuals involved in the sale of counterfeit seeds and uncertified unnecessary materials, warning that such acts undermine the country's food production and farmers' livelihoods.
A national security issue and should be handled as such. Those who are selling fake seeds should be held as treasonable individuals. It's treason, really. Because what happens when people in the country don't have food? You all know around the world what happens.
We are also going to establish demonstration farm where farmers will be invited to come and see what new methods of growing crops are available to be able to realize high yield for the purpose of attaining food security.
We know the sizes of our land because of the increased population are getting smaller by the day, and therefore we must start looking at production per unit. We must start looking at the quality of the produce.
All right, now the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, that is EPRA, has concluded a series of public consultations on the proposed Kenya Pipeline Company tariffs for the financial years of 2025, 2026 to 2027, 2028. And according to Deputy Director Waweru Karanja, the forums held across several towns were aimed at promoting transparency and public participation before the new rates are implemented. Karanja noted that the proposed 2.4% adjustment could lead to a slight increase in fuel pump prices as the funds will go towards system upgrades and improving pipeline efficiency.
The Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, EPRA, the body mandated to regulate Kenya's energy sector, has received an application from KPC seeking a review of pipeline transportation and secondary storage tariffs for the tariff control period commencing 2025-2026, ending 2027-2028. This review aims to reflect changes. The Constitution of Kenya and the Energy Act require that before any tariff adjustments are considered, the voices of stakeholders and the public must be heard. This process embodies our shared commitment to transparency, accountability, and inclusivity in regulatory decision-making. As you may be aware, KPC operates a 1,342-kilometer pipeline network transporting petroleum products from Mombasa.
All right, it is exactly 39 minutes past the top of the hour. Do for a short breather here on EBN Morning Live. But when you come back, we tell you what exactly the newspapers today are saying. Don't go too far. Newspaper review segment, and of course we want to tell you what exactly the newspapers are saying. I'm having the Daily Nation newspaper and the Standard newspaper dated today, the 6th day of November 2025. Now, top story on the Daily Nation: senior school fees shocker for parents. And of course, the Daily Nation have given education, top priority on their front page, and for 1,130,669 pioneers of the competency-based education, that is the CBE progress to the next level, will hit the pockets of their parents and guardians hard, as a majority of them will now be required to pay higher fees. All right. Now, the new guidelines released by the Education Ministry: learners in day schools will, for the first time since 2015, pay 9,374 shillings annually while those in all boarding institutions will be charged a flat rate of 53,554 Kenya shillings each. All right, that's on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. Of course, that's a huge shocker to the parents who are used actually to to pay a little amount for the education of their kids in secondary schools. All right, now the guidelines have also effectively reduced the amount of money allocated to the free day secondary education program, as learners who will attend senior school in day schools will now have to pay a portion of tuition fees. Previously, parents paid fees for boarding schools according to categorization as national, extra county, or county schools. The previous systems was aimed at government questioning parents from financial burdens. Currently, parents with children in schools categorized as nations or as national pay will actually pay the 53,554 Kenya shillings, while those in extra county and county schools will pay 40,535 Kenya shillings. However, parents and children in day schools, that is in sub-county schools, will pay annual fees of 9,374 Kenya shillings, while those with special needs learners will pay a sum of 37,210 Kenya shillings. And of course, the burden continues, to rise and rise and rise and rise, and it's quite unfortunate. You'll have to pay that kind of money in for your, secondary school kid. Of course, moving on to other matters making headlines in the Daily Nation newspaper this particular morning, matters politics. All right, now listen to this story. Ruto's political conundrum, or the M, what the Daily Nation has quote unquote says blackmail and 2027 bid. All right, now fresh demand by ODM to lay claim to the deputy president's seats in any deal with the UDA has complicated the political puzzle for President William Ruto, who must make new alliances while maintaining a tight grip on his old bases. All right, and actually yesterday, the ODM party leader, rather the acting party leader, that is Oburu Oginga, who's actually the brother to the late former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, yesterday actually said, and I quote, "If we have to go for a lower position, it must be, rather it must not be lower than number 2, that is the deputy president." All right, in any formation. This is my take. We should not take less than that. All right. Now, I don't know what will happen to the current deputy president if, just in case, the head of state, decides to take what the ODM party is saying. And of course, I don't know what will be done to the current deputy president, that is Professor Kithure Kindiki. Of course, the ODM says that in the next election, the coming election of 2027, they won't take less than number 2, that is the deputy president position. All right, I saw this coming. And of course, you'll remember that, during the burial, there was sort of, contentious debate about other members of the party, or that is the ODM party, says we'll support the current government in 2027, as Baba wanted. Of course, other members of the party said in 2027 it's either we be in government or we be the government. Now, Oburu Oginga, who is the interim leader of ODM party, now says they won't take less than deputy president. All right. Of course, we shall be waiting to see how that unfolds. All right. Now, the head of state, William Ruto, has adopted a cautious approach as his United Democratic Alliance (UDA) navigates the rough waters of coalition making ahead of the 2027 general election. Now, a fresh demand by the Orange Democratic Movement, that is ODM, to claim the deputy president's seat has intensified a political puzzle, forcing Dr. Ruto to, juggle the interest of his Mount Kenya East base, woo unsettled Mount Kenya West leaders, and keep other regional blocks intact. Now, in an exclusive interview, with this particular newspaper, ODM interim leader, that is Dr. Oburu Oginga, stated that his party will not settle for anything less than DP's position in any coalition arrangement, whether aligned with Dr. Ruto's UDA or the opposition. All right, now for President William Ruto, the timing could not be trickier. Barely a year after his public clash with former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, which culminated in the latter's impeachment in October last year, signs of friction now emerging, with Mount Kenya East leaders expressing their reservations with any attempts to replace Professor Kithure Kindiki. Now, UDA Deputy Secretary General, that is Omboko Milemba, said coalition discussions are fundamentally about negotiations and compromise. Now, he said that ODM is within its rights to assert its preferred position. All right. You see now the interim leader, that is Oburu Oginga, now says he won't take less than deputy president in either the ruling party, that is UDA, or the opposition. All right. And if so, if you try to juggle this particular situation, I don't foresee a situation where Professor Kithure Kindiki will actually step down as deputy president, because he actually, he was sworn in after the impeachment of the former deputy president, who also doubles up as the DCP party leader, that is Rigathi Gachagua. And of course, he has actually served as deputy president for, less than 3 years. All right. Shall be waiting to see, what unfolds in that particular matter. Now, Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka, a long-time ally of Raila Amolo Odinga, will on Thursday, that is today, lead a large delegation from Ukambani to Kango Kajaramogi in Bondo to pay their last respects to the former Prime Minister. Now, Mr. Musyoka, who stood by Mr. Odinga in 3 successive presidential bids, will be accompanied by more than 500 people, including elected leaders, elders, and supporters from the Ukambani. Now, the delegation will also include members of the party's National Executive Council, governors, MPs, MCAs, clergy, and community representatives. And according to the organizers, the team will first visit Kango Kajaramogi, where Mr. Odinga was buried, before proceeding to Opoda Farm. Now, the Wiper leader will present 100 herds of cattle to the Odinga family as part of the visit. Elders from Ukambani are expected to perform traditional rites during the ceremony. Of course, we shall be keeping tabs with that particular story, and of course, we shall be bringing you in a subsequent bulletins later on in the day. All right. Of course, I actually heard that also the former DP, that is Rigathi Gachagua, will actually be visiting the home of the late former Prime Minister, that is Raila Amolo Odinga, and of course, may he continue resting in peace. Now, moving on to other stories making headlines in the Daily Nation. Paul was, and we are afraid to leave our homes. Kenyans in Tanzania cry out. Now, Kenyans say they are facing hostility in a country they have always considered home. That's a story on page 8 on the Daily Nation. Matters across our borders. And you remember that, Tanzania actually held their polls just recently, actually, and of course, they were marred by post-election protests, all right? And the government, the sitting government then, before, they took power for a second term, they actually imposed a curfew to that particular republic, saying, the situation there was hostile. Now, it was a Kenyan, not his actual name, a Kenyan who works in Tanzania, has not stepped out since the eve of October 29th. General election. The air is still tense as a crackdown targeting foreigners intensifies. Rose says Kenyans face hostility in a country they have always considered home. Now deleting text in second nature as many fear getting caught with what the Daily Nation terms as strong messages. Kenyans interviewed said they are even afraid of calling their loved ones across the border or sharing their experiences on social media. Now, while the government called for a return to normalcy, the Kenyans, they spoke to said many businesses remain shut. Visiting friends is out of question. Kenyans say they are bringing the brunt of violence, election-related protest, which left many people dead. Now, there have been reports of arrests too. All right, now Vocal Africa Chief Executive Officer Hussein Khalid said a 29-year-old Kenyan lawyer identified as Frederick Laurent Obuya was picked up by police officers in Dar es Salaam on October 31st. And of course, at that note, you'll remember, of course, in the neighboring country also, that is in Uganda, there are two missing activists, that is Oyo, and that is Nicholas Oyo and Bob Njagi. Now, in Tanzania, the Kenyans in Tanzania say they fear even getting out of their homes. Now, in which country is Kenya safe? And why has the government remained silent in this what's happening in the nations, rather our citizens in the neighboring countries? Of course, you'll remember that the activist, that is Boniface Mwangi, was actually abducted in Tanzania. He was tortured. All right? That is in Tanzania also. And, upon people pressuring the government is when the government decided, we will have a consultation with the country. And of course, after the consultation, Boniface Mwangi was actually released. All right? And before then, the Tanzanian government said we have that particular activist in our custody. But after interventions, he was produced. All right? It's quite unfortunate, even to travel abroad. Moving on to other stories making headlines in the Daily Nation, matters education. Of course, the government will pay, that is 7.7 billion in two equal tranches. And of course, that's, they actually resolved the strike, the varsity strike that has been going on, that is since early September. All right. Now, universities, there's a picture there of actually University Academic Staff Union Secretary General, that is Dr. Constantine Songa, and Education Cabinet Secretary Julius Migos Ogamba at Jogoo House, Nairobi, yesterday, where they signed a return to work formula to bring to an end a 49-day pay strike by the public university lecturers and staff. All right. Now, inside the deal that ended 49-day varsity dawns strike, after nearly 2 months of paralysis that disrupted learning for over 600,000 students in public universities, lecturers and varsity staff yesterday called off their strike after intense negotiations and signing of a return to work formula. The agreement came as some students had already gone back home, while some universities had cancelled the semester. Of course, that's a story on page 2 and 3 of the Daily Nation this particular morning. All right, now that's what's up on the Daily Nation newspaper this morning. Matters education, matters politics. Now let's take a look on what's making headlines on the Standard newspaper this particular morning of the 6th day of November 2025. Now, top story on the Standard newspaper says, "Help, we are dying." Of course, there is a picture there of a family. That is John Kariuki with his wife, Rehab Modoni, parents of missing ex-KDF soldier Samuel Maina, who hold portraits of their 31-year-old son at their home in Kilimambogo, Kiambu County. Maina is reported to be in Russia and has been missing for several months. And below there are pictures of Russian soldiers and foreign fighters, including Kenyans actually. Now the family actually says, as the world's deadliest war grinds on, Kenya's forgotten sons are bleeding on the Russian front lines, trapped by deceit and abandoned by diplomacy. President William Ruto and Prime Cabinet Secretary, that is Musalia Mudavadi, who vowed swift action nearly 2 weeks ago, have gone silent as families drawn in anguish, begging for news of their children. All right, that's on page 6 and 7 of the Standard newspaper. Let's take a look at that particular story on page 6 and 7. Of course, this is actually not a new story to hear the government, especially the CS for Foreign Affairs, that is Musalia Mudavadi, goes silent on issues affecting Kenyans abroad. And the one may wonder, what's actually the purpose of that particular office, or him being in that particular office. Now, Kenyans on the front lines of Russia's war cry out for help. Now, young men boarded planes filled with hope, believing that they had secured jobs abroad, only to find themselves trapped in a nightmare far from home, fighting in a war they never signed up for. Now, all of them left on tourist visas, lured by unscrupulous agencies and Russians, some of whom the Standard has established operated within Kenya's borders, promising lucrative jobs in Russia. Now, a high-placed source at Kenya's mission in Moscow told the Standard that even before we broke the story of Kenyans trapped in Russia on October 27th, the Department of Diaspora Affairs had begun a process of seeking out Kenyans forced into war to help them return home. Now, 6 families from different parts of the country have reached out to the Standard to raise their voices in attempt to save their loved ones who have today serving on the war front lines. Now, we have also reached at least 10 youthful Kenyans living in nightmare in war, who are able to break thick security rules using modern technology to share their stories with us. That's a story actually on page 6 and 7. Goes on and on, matters to do with Kenyans abroad in Russia. And of course, the family is actually seeking answers from the government to the whereabouts of their Kenyans. And of course, this is a Kenyan soldier, a KDF soldier actually. Now, what happens to an ordinary citizens such as the likes of Bob Njagi and Nicholas Zoyo? All right, quite unfortunate. Or even the Kenyans in Tanzania. If the government may fail to protect its, public servants, a KDF officer may wonder what might happen to just an ordinary, citizens held abroad. Now, other stories making headlines on the Standard newspaper: relief for university students as staff signed return to work deal, which was actually done yesterday with WASU Secretary General, that is Dr. Constantine Wesonga, and the Education CS, that is Julius Migos Ogamba, actually signed a return to work formula after 49-day strike. All right, now, lecturers and non-academic staff agreed to a two-phased plan after 49-day strike. Now, negotiations for a new CBA, that is the collective bargaining agreement for the 2025 to 2029 cycle, must be concluded in actually 30 days. All right. Of course, that is actually good news that, the university students won't have to, extend their years of learning in school. And of course, it won't actually, influence the graduation calendar, right? You may find someone who is due in a university course for 4 years is actually going for 6 years because of these strikes, which actually occurs on and on and on and on. Moving on to other stories making headlines on the Standard newspaper this morning. MPs puts education CS to task over what they termed as ghost school audit. Of course, yesterday, the CS education, that is Julius Migos Ogamba, appeared before the National Assembly yesterday to explain why, monies have been disbursed to non-existent schools All right, we actually had these instances of, the government, disbursing funds to schools that are not there. All right, of course, even to to students, allocating the money that the government actually disburses to students that are ghost students. All right. Now, the CS said a recent verification exercise has borne fruit, adding that the government has served about 1.1 billion Kenya shillings. Now, Ogamba said the information collected since the exercise started in September will be analyzed to determine issues that the National Assembly had raised, including whether the ministry has been releasing capitation to schools that do not exist. But Speaker Moses Wetangula wondered why the ministry was doing more investigations. Ogamba, however, said the 10 schools that had no students had been closed, adding that the ministry would find out why the learners had snubbed the institutions. All right. Now, he said it was important to establish whether capitation had been released to such schools previously to determine whether there were fraud, in addition to getting evidence to use against those suspected. Now, he said reports by the Office of the Auditor General had already, was already with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, but the MPs sought action from the Ministry of Education. All right. Of course, this was actually a heated debate yesterday at the National Assembly. Ogamba now says that students in that particular schools abandoned the schools, and one may wonder, how can a student abandon a school? All right? That's what's up in the times we're living in right now. All right? Moving on to other stories making headlines, matters, corridors of justice. Aziad Masenya, that is a socialite, sues SACCO in 20 million Kenya shillings property dispute. Now, social media influencer Aziad Masenya is embroiled in a 21 million Kenya shillings court battle with a deposit-taking SACCO. Now, in a case filed before the Commercial Court in Nairobi, she accuses Corner Deposit-Taking Savings and Credit Society of illegally listing to auction her 20 million apartment to recoup the money. Masenya argues that there was an agreement that the SACCO buys an apartment at Platinum Oak, Nairobi, on her behalf, and she would repay the loan within the agreed timelines. She, however, says that due to harsh economy, she fell into arrears of around 1.5 million Kenya shillings as of September this year. Now, the SACCO says she informed her that it has used 2.4 million Kenya shillings savings to clear the arrears. But of September 24th, Corner ran an advert indicating that the Kileleshwa property would be sold to an auction on October 8th. Now, the content creator asserts that the move was illegal and unfair, as the financial institution had already recovered the amount owed to it using her savings. Of course, there's a story on page 3 of the Standard newspaper this morning. And of course, the stories in the corridors of justice. Court affirms the sacking of a man who cut down tree. Now, an employee who was sacked for cutting down a tree has lost his bid to save his job. Now, the labor courts agreed with the employer that Caleb Wafula deserved the sacking for gross misconduct on May 28th of 2024. However, Justice James Rika disagreed with Lipton Teas and Infusion Kenya that the tea picker deserved a summary dismissal, ruling that he should be paid his gratuity for the 13 years he had worked. Wafula went to court claiming that Lipton Teas and Infusion Kenya had irregularly fired him. The court heard that Wafula and his son were found with an axe and machete in December 2013. All right. Now, the two, according to the company, were cutting down an indigenous tree, which has against the company's policy. All right. That's matters, corridors of justice. Someone losing his job because of cutting a tree, which is actually against, or rather, which was actually against the company's policy. All right. Moving on. 5 have been arrested in shooting probe state ones of tougher bond terms. Of course, you'll remember that the KCSE, that is the Kenya Certificate of Secondary School Education, actually started this particular week. And of course, a week has not actually ended. Of course, at least 36 people have been arrested in exam malpractice and aiding students, in the exams. Now, at least 5 people have been arrested in Nairobi and other parts or the other regions for allegedly impersonating candidates in the ongoing Kenya Certificate of Secondary School Education examinations. Cabinet Secretary Julius Migos Ogamba yesterday condemned cheating, saying the government has enforced security at all centers. He warned that offenders will face severe legal action. All right, Ogamba urged more than 960,000 candidates who started their written examination this week to stay calm and trust the process. At the same time, the Director for Public Prosecution, Renson Igonga, warned against malpractice, saying he would push for tougher bond terms for anyone arrested. Speaking at Kakamega School, Igonga said the justice systems must send a strong message. All right, and still at that particular matter, you'll remember that this particular examinations invigilators, actually the ministry said that teachers, secondary school teachers, will not invigilate the examination, that is the KCSE. Instead, the primary school teachers will invigilate the KCSE, which is actually going on. Now, there are people impersonating candidates. And a primary school teacher wouldn't know if this particular person is a student from this particular school. And I don't know what's your take on that. Primary school teachers invigilating secondary school learning. Of course, now we've seen actually that people are impersonating someone who has a uniform and sits for an examination. Do tell us your thoughts through SMS line to 3059. Now, on page 4, matters politics and ODM demand for DP position threatens Kindiki's prospects. All right, that's on page 4 of the Standard newspaper. Matters to do with ODM party and the ruling party, that is UDA party, which actually the head of state is the flag bearer. And of course, there is a picture there of Deputy President Kithure Kindiki. And as the country heads towards the next general election and political formation strategize to capture power, the Orange Democratic Movement insists on securing the running mate position and has unsettled the balance of power within the ruling coalition. Now, the declaration by the acting party leader, that is Oburu Oginga, has placed Deputy President Professor Kithure Kindiki in a tight spot, casting uncertainty over his future in President William Ruto's government. All right. Now, Kindiki's political prospects now appear uncertain, with his allies in the Mount Kenya region warning they could withdraw their support for president if he replaces their own. All right. Now, in an interview with local media house last week, Oginga stated that the party will not accept a position lower than of a deputy president. Now, Oburu's remarks have rattled Kindiki's allies from Mount Kenya East, who have threatened to abandon President William Ruto camp should he enter into a pre-coalition agreement with ODM that guarantees the running mate position at Kindiki's expense. All right. Now this what's up on matters politics. The ODM says they want to be deputy president or withdraw support to the ruling party. Also, the supporters of Kithure Kindiki, of course, Kithure Kindiki comes from the Mount Kenya region. Now, people supporting Kithure Kindiki in the Mount Kenya region says if they drop or they pull down their leader, their Mount Kenya leader, that is Kithure Kindiki, they will also withdraw their support for President William Ruto come 2027. All right? And the ODM also wants at least a deputy president position. All right? Recently, we saw that the head of state, that is President William Ruto, actually had talks and a tete-a-tete with Moi's son, the late President Moi's son, that is Gideon Moi. Of course, what it may look as a strategy for the upcoming election. Now, the political arena is actually in confusion. We're waiting to see what the head of state's stance is. All right? Quite interesting, however, interesting story right there. All right, you're now up to speed with what's making headlines in 47 counties and, of course, in our dailies today. My name is Martin Mashere. Many thanks for keeping me company until this particular morning. You're now up to speed with what we're waking up to this morning as far as news is concerned. But we'll be keeping tabs with this, developing stories, and of course, the opposition leaders are actually set to visit Kango Kajaramogi, where the late former Prime Minister Raila Odinga was actually buried. Of course, we shall be bringing you that and much more stories that are making headlines this particular day in our subsequent bulletins later on in the day at 1 p.m., 4 p.m., 7 p.m., and 9 p.m. My name is Martin Masharia. Do have yourself a lovely day. Up next is Your Faith Today. Do remember to tune in for that particular show. My name is Martin Masharia once again. And of course, let's meet again later on in the day, even as we continue keeping you up to speed with what's making headlines from across our 47 counties and of course across our borders as far as news is concerned. But until then, let's do this again when God says we do.